Okay, so with the sucrose synthesis. So the sucrose synthesis compared to starch is happening in the cytosol. Okay, so that is very important. Now, the steps that are happening are pretty much very similar. The only point is right here. So where fructose 1,6-phosphate is being made. So at this point, this is the enzyme fructose 1,6-phosphatase, which will then decide, what is the further fate of this fructose, whether it's going to go, into starch or sucrose. And then also what is very important, it is to mention that the labeling of those glucose 1-phosphate is not with ATP, but rather than the UTP. So the glucose that is labeled with the UDP, the uridine diphosphate, now that is going to go into sucrose, okay? So like I said before, there are no, like kind of free-floating molecules of glucose. Every glucose molecule has to know its fate. And the one that is labeled with the UDP will be converted into the sucrose. And of course, that is happening in the cytoplasm, which makes sense, right? We need this sucrose to be made in the cytoplasm so it can be transported out. Let me just jump to talking about some interesting facts. And the production of sucrose and starch, these are competing processes. So under normal circumstances, when everything is okay and there is enough light, life is perfect, both sucrose and starch are going to be made kind of simultaneously. Now, the problems, are going to arrive when we have hardships, similar to what we have now with this curfew. The hardship for a plant, what do you think, what would that be? So what are those hard times for the plant? So you're going to think about that and then answer to me virtually or in your minds. But the key enzyme in this case would be fructose 1,6-biphosphate phosphatase. So that's the regulatory point. So those conditions are some type of stress. And one of the major stresses and like the major environmental stress number one for plants is low light condition. Okay, so this is the picture from the beginning, and now we have low light conditions. So, things cannot go as normal when you have some type of stress, which, we are all familiar with this coronavirus. So, I think this would be an easy question to happen, the easy question to answer. What is the plant going to do when there is hardship? Okay, so what is the first thing that we do when there is a hurricane coming, when there is a curfew coming? What do you do? Okay, what? I'm still waiting for the answer. Well, one thing I can tell you what I do is I stock up on my supplies. So, I buy extra flour, I buy extra chocolate, extra snacks for my daughter. I buy extra rice. That's the, one thing that I buy. So it's the same thing pretty much for plants. With a low light condition, there is no export of those sugars. The plant is going to be like, oh my God, these are hot times. I need to stock up on starch because starch is the form of sugar that is used as a deposit, right? So that is how the plant is going to convert the biochemical cycles that happen normally. So no more export, just the accumulation of starch. So of course, even though they are competing processes under low light condition, there is a photosynthetic control, and the process is feedback limited. Okay, so under low light conditions, these transporters that usually transport those trial sugars out, they are going to be closed and they will going to be blocked. So there will be only production of starch. And you will see that if you expose plants with the low light conditions, you can see chloroplasts starting to build up starch, and they can actually convert themselves into amyloplast, which is pretty amazing. There was a very simple experiment being done called griddled. So when you kind of peel off the bark, you will see that the bark on top will kind of going to start to swell, because this is where the like in the outer layer, this is where the phloem is located, right? The xylem is in the center and then the phloem is here. So those sugars cannot pass from the top part of the plant down to the base. What do we see in the phloem? Of course, sucrose, and there are other types of sugars. There are amino acids, different type of organic acids, proteins. I'm going to talk about more. Some hormones, of course, and some other types of molecules. So apart from sugar, there are other types of more complex and long sugars which are being transported. And then also some sugars are converted into alcohol, such as mannitol and sorbitol, and that's the way that they're transported. Now, the structure of the phloem. We talk about that in great detail. You have the sieve tube member. Of course, compared to the xylem, phloem is alive. However, phloem cells, there isn't much inside as there are not a lot of organelles. They would maybe have some cytoplasm and maybe a nucleus and maybe an endoplasmatic reticulum, but that is it. And because of that, they need to have a companion cell which would have all the organelles and will kind of aid this cell in transporting of the sugars. There is another type of the cell called a transport cell, and I'm trying to see if I have a picture with that. So transport or transfer cells are additional cells, and it's very hard to differentiate them from the companion cells, but this is just another type of cells which are used in aiding the phloem in transport those sugars. Now, I mentioned that in phloem, apart from sugars, you see type of proteins which are called P protein bodies, and they are also closely associated with the glucan called callose. The main function of that is to prevent the leakage of phloem sap when the plant is being injured. So plant has the ability to heal itself. So this is a picture of a bamboo, and you can see how these openings become smaller and smaller due to the accumulation of these proteins and callose. Next, and the last thing what we are going to talk about is we are going to talk about which organs in the plants require more sugar. Okay, so you will see that we have areas which produce sugars, such as leaves, and then we have areas of the plant which have a high metabolic activity and are active, and they are called the sinks. So these are the areas of the plants which really need those photoassimilates from the source.